enlightening, inspirational, powerfully refining, and unapologetically controversial. Conversations with the Royal Empress. The entire world knows the secret of who you are. Now is the time to step into your queendom and become the Royal Empress that you're meant to be. One woman at a time. Conversations with the Royal Empress. Now Akila, she's the analytical Empress. Akima, she's the Empress that will challenge you. Now, straighten up your crown and be elevated through conversations. Conversations with the Royal Empress.
Welcome back to Conversations with the Royal Empress. This is Dr. Hakima, and joining me is my sister from another mother, my kindred spirit, and co-host of Royal Empress, Akila. We have a special guest joining us today. Our special guest is Camille, and I want to say a little bit about this sister. You are going to love her. Camille is a wonderful daughter, mother, criminal defense attorney, and freedom fighter. But I'm going to add a little something extra to that about that. She is a wonderful sister. I remember the first time I ever came across Sister Camille. Our paths crossed because of our careers. So I saw her and I said, oh my Lord, there is a sister that is an attorney in a courtroom with a black female judge. I was like, Black girl magic. And I was so impressed with her. And I said, man, I really wish this sister much success. And I would see her from time to time due to a work situation. But then one day I was formally introduced to my sister, and I said, I know this sister from somewhere. I know her. And we got to talking and it clicked. We met at work, and it's been gravy ever since. So I just want to welcome you, Camille, my sister. I love you. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, I appreciate it. And thank you for those wonderful words. And it's been such a pleasure, likewise, meeting and getting to know you and just our paths crossing in that way. So I appreciate you all having me on tonight.
Okay. So today's topic, and this is how we met in the criminal justice system. So the topic of today is the criminal justice system. Is it bent or is it just broken? What do you guys think?
I'm gonna let Madam criminal defense attorney speak.
Well, if I don't have to be politically correct, from what I see on an everyday basis working in the criminal courts, I would personally say that it's broken. I think it's far past bent just because it's so deeply rooted injustice that the bent has been like bent so much that it broke. Yeah, it's pretty bad. I mean, you have to work in it and navigate in it. And I know some may say, well, how do you work in it if you think it's broken? But I feel like that's why I'm there to do what I can to safeguard people's rights and try to remedy some of the wrongs that are done by the system, and just be there as someone who cares and a watchful eye and someone who's willing to fight back. You have to fight back against this system. So I do it the legal way, but I'm pretty fierce about it.
There are so many people who have a negative view even about some criminal defense attorneys, because I think that people feel that the system is broken, they almost feel like you have some people who feel like attorneys and judges are in cahoots with one another and not really recognizing that there are attorneys who take their job seriously. They're not there trying to make a name for themselves. They're not there. They really are, as you said, Camille, freedom fighters. They are really there. And I don't know if it's few and far between, or if more people are really there because they truly want to fight, to give people a chance in this system. So I mean, you come across people every day. I'm not in court every day.
I actually agree with that, and I think that people do view criminal defense attorneys. You hear on the snake, and I've even had clients that if you say, well, I want to talk to the state and negotiate, they think, oh, well, if you speak with them, that you're working with them. And so it's a misunderstanding on one part of just how the system is and how you have to still communicate with the different parties in order to even get what you want in the end. It has to be communication. And so I explain that to my clients and let them know, listen, I'm your attorney. All the things that need to be done and should be done on your behalf, be sure that I'm going to do them. And I'm never going to sell you out to the other side. But on the other side, I know that there are some criminal defense attorneys and even other type of attorneys who are not so honorable in their mission, and they're not so dedicated. See, the thing about me is I represent majority of my own people. And so I look at my clients as me, as my family, as it could easily be anyone in my immediate circle who could be on that other side of the law. And so I always kind of remember that with everyone I'm dealing with. I deal with young men who are my son's age. So how would I want someone to treat my son? So I try to keep that in my practice. And when I deal with my clients, and I try to keep the judgment out. And in this line of work, you're dealing with a lot of serious allegations. You have to keep the judgment out in order to be effective. And I think there are a lot of defense attorneys who really, I think, are in it for the money. And I'm not here to slam anyone, but it's just, we're just honest. There's bad teachers, there's great teachers. So every line of work, I've seen people hire certain ones and they plea them out on the next court date when they had a wonderful trial. So everyone is not going to put the same effort in. Everyone is not going to want to put the same time in. And I'm certainly not perfect, but because I care, I think that some of the care is out of some people's practice. And so it then becomes a bad name for everyone. But I know I have some wonderful colleagues who are passionate and really dedicated to their clients and really angered about the injustices that happen, and they allow that to help fuel them in their trials, in their negotiations with the state, because they really understand how unjust this system is. And when you really understand it and see it and allow it to kind of anger you and not to make you want to fight and just be angry, but to let it fuel you in what your duties are, then it's a lot different. And Akila, I get a lot of clients, even their mothers are just like, wow, it's just been such a pleasure. And it makes me feel so good. And it's not to toot my own horn, but it also is a little bit sad because it makes you know that it's the unusual, that it's not the norm. And that's very sad, especially in a system that is already so against everything, really that's supposed to be just. And so for it to be just that much of a shocker that you really care and that you'll give a encouragement outside of something related to the case, that you'll say, hey, well, how's your housing? Or, I want you to go back to school, young man. And, they're like, wow, she really cares about us. She sees us. And that's what I try to take pride. I want to see my clients and I want to make sure that they're seen as people, because really once you enter into that system, you're the bad person, you're the defendant. You know, the state in a trial doesn't even want to say your name. Their argument is the defendant did this and they're pointing the finger. So you become nameless, really. You have a case number and you're the defendant. And a lot of times to the officers who are handling you, not all of them, there's some great ones, but you're the defendant. You did something bad. That's the only reason you would be here. But in reality, all it takes is one allegation for someone to be there. And it doesn't even have to be an allegation that is supported by any or much evidence. So, you know, I don't want people to think it's so hard to become a defendant. And that might not be for the most severe crime. But if I say, hey, listen, I saw her come up here and she broke my window, we might have to figure out later that I really lied on you because I had a bias against you, or we have some old beef. And I just wanted to use the system because I'm just one of those people that misuse the system. But all that happens after you've had to either hire an attorney or bond out or tell your job that I have this case now, or lose your apartment or lose your job. You know what I mean? So I think people need to realize that everyone in the system is not bad. And really, even those that are bad, who might have done something bad, maybe, yes, they might need to be held accountable. I'm not in love with crime. I'm not for crime. And, you know, I think certain actions deserve consequences, but I think we need to get there in a fair and just way. I think the police need to find the evidence in a fair and just way. I think you need to be treated fairly as you're brought in so that you can have your day in court and they can produce all this wonderful evidence they have against you. And you have a good, competent attorney that's going to make sure that it's produced and presented properly. And then if the chips fall where they may and you're guilty, then hey, you're guilty. Now, I don't agree with necessarily the sentencing, you know, and the way the law has mandated certain sentences. But for now, I have to fight on this end. And then maybe one day I'll try to help remedy that as well. But I do agree we can get a bad name, and I try to make sure that people can leave, from my experience, understanding that that's not how all criminal defense attorneys are.
Or attorneys in general, because people sometimes...
Attorneys in general, absolutely.
Yeah, I think people kind of have a bad taste in their mouth sometimes when it comes to lawyers in general. You know, you get all these bad designations and not understanding that everybody is not like that. And I've had those experiences too, where people are like, you're different than I thought you would be. And you're thinking like, what is that supposed to mean? But there are lawyers who don't. And I think that one of the things, I had a conversation with somebody, and as we're talking about this, I think people need to understand that just because a lawyer is downtown and has a high hourly rate does not mean that they're a good lawyer. And I was having a conversation with someone, and they alluded to the fact that, well, you know, the lawyer downtown, I would assume is going to be better than a lawyer that's like, say, on 90 something in Ashland. And I thought, no, that's not what that means. So you're looking at the office of the attorney and not understanding that maybe that attorney is the freedom fighter and he wants to be in the community, to be accessible to you. And you want to run downtown and pay somebody who's charging more money because they're spending more money on their rent.
Yeah.
So I think that that's something that people have to understand too. Don't go looking at where the lawyer's office is. Now, I'm not saying to go get somebody that's in a shack somewhere, but I'm just saying that seriously though, you have so many people, they look at it's that attitude that many of us have. And so you're not going to get justice thinking that the only way to get it is because you think that you can pay this amount of money. Now, granted, there are some really good attorneys who happen to be high-priced attorneys who are high-profile attorneys who take high-profile cases. We're not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that people are equating where an attorney's office is to determine whether they are a good lawyer. If I'm not mistaken, what's the attorney, James Montgomery? James Montgomery was in downtown, was he, Camille?
I'm not sure.
I don't think so. I don't think he was like in downtown in one of those high-rise buildings. Neither was, shoot. I mean, it's quite a few of them that I can think of who were out there. But
accessible.
Standish Willis.
Yeah.
I don't think he was.
I don't believe so.
Yeah. So I'm just saying. So there really great attorneys who don't necessarily have that address, and I just really hope that people don't think that you have to go somewhere, and because this one charges $600 an hour, that means he's a better attorney. That's not what that means.
Oh, I agree with you on that. When I was an officer and being assigned to court with of taking inmates to court, I have literally had to pull inmates off an attorney that they spent all that money per hour for, to come in and not really be prepared and not really understanding this person's background. And this possibly was a lawyer their family paid for, but just didn't do the research on this person. But yet I've seen inmates have a public defender, and the public defender defended them better, did more research on their case than a paid attorney. Because some people think, oh, a paid attorney is better than a public defender, and that's not necessarily true. So people have these misconceptions of what a good lawyer is and what a bad lawyer is. Camille, can you expound on that, or just clarify what people should be looking for if they're looking for a lawyer, and what should be like these red flag signs?
Well, I would say that, just I think some of the general things would be just from your first meeting, the first interview you have with the client, just some of the questions that are asked, how much are they trying to understand, like you said, about the person, not just someone who is only looking at the police report, but you want to just kind of have an idea, really like a holistic. And I know everyone can't, try to be the social worker, the lawyer, the this. That's not at all. I mean, I know the job is to defend this charge, but I think really how the person listens, the attention that the person gives you, for those, if it's 15 minutes, if it's an hour long, whatever time, but there's a connection that you're going to feel, and you're going to feel valued by that person. You're going to feel like they hear you, like they're actually paying attention and interested in helping. You want to hear their assessment of the case. And every lawyer doesn't know about, off the top of their head, every charge and every case, but you certainly want someone who, if they don't know, they're going to say, hey, I'm going to look this up. I think we may have some issues. I'm going to look into them. So you want someone willing to not necessarily act like they know everything, but more than willing to find out. Because the law is always evolving. There's always going to be something out there that you don't know off the top of your head, but you have access to it. And so you may have some of the same charges come in, but this may be something you never had before. That doesn't mean that you can't jam on that case, right? It's just you have to take the time to find out what the statute says. Okay, what is the law saying on this? What are our facts? You just have to care, really. And I think people will know. I think some people only want someone that's going to tell them what they want to hear. Yes. And I'm not that person. And I've sometimes had to tell clients, listen, don't get upset. I'm not the reason you're here. I want to help. But at the same time, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to sugarcoat. I know you don't like what I'm saying. Maybe you have to tell them this is a class X. The minimum on this is 6 years. I didn't make those rules, but I'm certainly obligated to inform you and want you to be knowledgeable of what's going on. And I think a lot of clients I see, and some of the ones that hire these, fancy private attorneys, and again, some of them are wonderful, But I have heard people stop me in the hallway and say, hey, I like the way you were talking to your client. I have a private, he doesn't tell me anything about the case. I don't know what happened on the last 3 court dates. Why? I said, why? Are you paying him? Yes. I said, then why aren't you asking the same questions if you could stop me in the hallway? And I appreciated the compliment, but that's your money, right? That person is working for you. So you need to ask these questions, and you need to make him sit down and explain to you what's going on. And some of it may go over your head because you're not a lawyer, but break it down to people. Don't talk at people. I think you want a lawyer who will try to break down some of the legal terms just so that you can understand what's going on. I share the statute with the clients. Look, these are the elements that the state has to prove. This is the evidence they have. This is what they're going to try to use for this element. This is what they're lacking on. I want them to be knowledgeable because I've seen too many clients, especially young Black males in the lockup, and you say, okay, well, what happened, at the other court? I don't know. I didn't hear. I don't know. They just said some stuff. I mean, clueless. And it just hurts my heart because they are just shifting through this system of this maze, just like with a bag over their head. Don't know anything, not asking the questions. No one's trying to explain it to them. And they don't know they are being led to slaughter and are just clueless. And it's terrifying. And I'm like, young man, how old are you? 19. I said, okay. I said, if you've never had to grow up, right now is the time. I need you to know what your charge is. I need you to know what your bond is. I do a lot of mothering in my lockup, because I can't help it. Maybe it's because I have a 23-year-old son, who thankfully has not had any contact with the system. But I also know that it's a blessing that he hasn't had any contact with the system, and not that we're so much better than anyone else, right? We've been blessed. But it hurts my heart, and I want to believe if I didn't have a son, if I didn't have any kids, that I would still have this same heart and want people to understand the system because it's so ugly. It's such an ugly system, and you gotta be knowledgeable a little bit. You gotta read at the jail if you can, if you know how to read. And that's another problem. Sometimes the education levels are just so low that they don't really even understand. And, things happen so fast in court. The sheriff is rushing you back. Once your lawyer's trying to turn and say what happened in that 3-minute spiel that the state was talking, the lawyer's talking, the judge is talking, you don't know what's going on. Everything is so fast. A lot of it is legal mumble jumble. You know what I mean? And so you want a lawyer that's going to break things down for you. And you want a lawyer who's going to keep you up to date. Now, that doesn't mean that person has time to talk to you all the time, because lawyers have a lot of cases. And I know when people have a case, they feel like this is your only case and I need to talk to you all the time. And I have those clients too. And it's like, look, I got you, but right now I can't talk about it. So you also have to understand that you leave a voicemail, they may not be able to get right back to you. All lawyers don't have secretaries and people who can, check the voicemail. They're out in court doing the work. They're out in the streets interviewing maybe or doing things. So you have to be patient as well. But I think clients will know if they're really into their case and they're looking for someone who can help them, then they're going to be honest with that person, because I don't like when the client doesn't tell me the truth and I find it out from the judge or the state's attorney and it puts me on the spot. That's not a good place to be in. And I'm the wrong person to be lying to, because I'm the one that has your back. So you want to be truthful with your attorney, but you also want them to be truthful with you. You want them to be interested in your case, and you want them to be someone who is not going to string you along. You don't want to start talking about pleading guilty in the first, second, third meetings. Now, if you have a lot of evidence against you and that lawyer says, look, this is not looking good, right? And this is a class X. And if the state is willing to reduce it from a class X because they have you on video, they got your fingerprints, they have this, then it may be in your best interest to not take the risk and go to trial. If we can get a reduced sentence where you're doing 2 instead of 6 years, your parole may be different. Sometimes you have to have those honest conversations. And at the end of the day, it's up to the client. But I'm going to let you know the risk going in. Even when I have a great case, I'm going to tell you, I think we can get this, but I can never guarantee you a win. Never, because you're dependent on a judge or you're dependent on 12 people from within Cook County, and that's not always dependable, even with the greatest cases. So I never want to guarantee. So you don't want a lawyer that's going to promise you anything other than their best efforts. And I think those are the things that you really want to look at in someone who will keep you posted and not just milk you for money, you know. But at the end of the day, private attorneys, they use that money also to fight your case because they're hiring investigators. And so I know there's a lot of chase for money for a lot of attorneys, not just defense attorneys, but chasing down clients to pay is, you know, not the best feeling in the world, I'm sure, either, you know, and it doesn't allow you to do your job well. So if you want your attorney to do your job well and you choose to pay an attorney, you know, then be honest about your abilities to pay and know that it can affect their ability to represent you as well.
Camille, what do you suggest for, and particularly for young people who have run-ins with the police, if they get arrested? What is your motherly lawyerly advice?
My motherly and lawyerly advice would be to not resist, not try to have the verbal battle with the police. Let your lawyer do that later. And I know, even as I'm saying this, half of my brain, if I'm honest, is saying, but Camille, you probably would be the one having that verbal battle if you got arrested. I'm just keeping it real. But it's really not the best. And when my mind tells me that, I also have to check my own self, because you get infuriated and you see all these things on TV and you see the police just over and over and over again. And I know it's so many great ones, but it's so many not great ones. And it's so much abuse of power and murder and so much stuff that it's really just not worth it. And even when you do, I hate that you should just comply. I hate those words every time something happens and you get the people that post, well, if they had just complied, because it's so easy to say, oh, you should have just complied, until you're in that situation. Because I know so many people that would just be, what? I didn't do anything. What do you mean, put my hands behind my back? I mean, just the natural human in us, if we don't understand the situation and why it's escalating in a certain way, you're going to want to say, wait a minute. No, I'm not. What do you mean, put my handcuffs? But especially for young Black men now who are just preyed upon, I would just say, listen, let someone keep your mouth closed, number one. Don't make any comments to the police if you're arrested other than, I want an attorney. If they say, listen, your friend told on you, if you tell us this and that, we'll let you out, they are lying to you. And the court has allowed them to lie. There's case law that says up to a certain point, they can say things to get confessions out of you. Keep your mouth closed. If you did do something and you want to be honest about it, do it through your lawyer. So I'm not saying don't ever tell something if you really did it. Just don't tell it to the police. There's a way that you can do that. Keep your mouth closed. Keep your hands to yourself. Now, I don't want to entice or, if you're being physically abused or battered, there is case law that says you can use self-defense if an officer is doing unlawful actions. But the question is going to be, who's going to make that decision on it, or if his actions were unlawful or not. So you just want to be careful. Now, of course, you're not going to just sit there and always allow someone you can't breathe, or you're going to want to, naturally your body's going to want to resist. But if you can, and if it's not that type of situation, don't argue. Just say, I want a lawyer, and let your lawyer do the battles. and then we're going to pray that you can actually get to a court and in front of other people and pass that encounter with the police, because it's gotten that bad where you really have to pray about every encounter with the police, which is really ridiculous and terrifying and infuriating, and really something that has to be stopped. I mean, it's really just a bad situation, and in particular here in our city, but in cities all over. And now with the invention of phone cameras, we're seeing it, but didn't just start happening.
That's right.
Exactly.
It's just now being captured on film, thankfully, but sometimes even when it's captured on film, the people who have the power to do something about it don't. It just makes people in the communities and around the world aware, if they weren't already aware. But if it's just an encounter that doesn't, turn physical, just don't try to talk your way out of it. I get a lot of clients that do that. Well, I just wanted to explain. Don't, because your words can and more than likely will get twisted. Ask for an attorney. Don't spit. Don't fight. It's not going to help. It just will add more charges, and it will make your attorney's job harder at beating probably the initial charge. So that would be my advice, and every situation is unique, so it's hard to say, but just in those general encounters, even when you really feel and know that your rights are being violated, really allow your attorney to fight that.
I have one
And
question
stay
for
quiet.
you, Camille.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for you. Now, I encounter this a lot, just from being a counselor. Now, I'm a mother. I'm just gonna give you an example of something. I just want to know what would be your advice on how a mother would handle it. I'm a mother. My child's first time locked up. What should I be doing? Because for a parent whose child's going through the criminal justice system for the first time is a very scary process. It's not like there's a lot of information for you. It's not like people are helpful. What tips could you give someone who's experiencing that for the first time, or family member who's experiencing that for the first time?
Absolutely. Well, I think if you are privy to the knowledge that the person is being arrested, like in real time, you're either present or it's happening, the first thing I would suggest is to get an attorney down to the station. And some people say, I don't have money for an attorney. I would have to gather money together. Well, the beauty of that is actually the public defender's office has a unit, and also First Legal Defense has attorneys who volunteer, and the public defender has staffed attorneys who the only job is to respond to the police station. Now, that will not be the attorney that stays on the case, but they will go down, they will check in, they will do a visit, make sure that the person has not been battered in any way, be able to tell that person, listen, don't answer any questions. The police, once they have an attorney, cannot question them further if they choose not to be questioned. And so it gives that first gate, right, to say, no, stop. Now you've arrested me. I can't really do anything about that at this second, but no more right now. And so that's what I would suggest. And I'm sorry I don't have that hotline number, but I can get it to you to post where they can call. But if they want to just call, at least for Cook County, of the public defender's office, there is a police station unit, is what it is called. And they will go down free of charge. They would just need to know where the person was arrested, their name, what police station you believe they went to. If you know any further information, that's helpful. But if that's all you know, then that's enough to just say, hey, the person does have to agree to allow that person to be the temporary attorney. They don't even have to really talk about the case or the charges with them. Again, they are just that first safety net, so there aren't any confessions, any I agree to do a lineup, any of that stuff that can happen at that first phase, especially for a young person who's never been in the system. You know, the police can be very manipulative. The system can be, but the police can be. And, you know, I know everyone has seen the
When they see us.
Central Park 5, yes.
I was gonna ask
when
you
they
your
see
thoughts on
us.
that too.
Yes. And, you know, it's mind-boggling to some people, but that's not new, right? Ava DuVernay did a wonderful job of it.
She did.
But this happened a long time ago, and that type of stuff has been happening and continues to happen today, right? It's just not as known about. Every day you see in the paper, on Facebook, someone else being released after 20, 30 years because evidence has come out that they didn't do it, even though they confessed. A lot of these confessions are not really confessions, right? And so it happens. And a lot of times they manipulate young people. They're afraid. They're going to say what they need to say. And you would think, why would anyone ever confess to something so horrible? I mean, our natural mind thinks that, like, who would say I did something that bad? But under certain circumstances and fear, you know, we never know what we would do in certain situations. And certainly someone who was not hip to this system, who's terrified, who's thinking about, oh my God, I'm going to be in jail, you know, who might have anxiety or some underlying emotional health or mental health issues or some medical issues that they're afraid about. You know, you just want to have that first layer of protection if you can. So that would be my first advice, is to get someone to that police station as fast as you know that they're there. And also talk to your children before this ever happens. You pray that it never happens, but parents, have a conversation with your boys and your girls about the system and how to interact with the police and what to do if ever arrested for something. And I tell even my 13-year-old, I don't care if you did it or did not do it. They'll say, listen, your friend, they'll name your best friend, they'll know stuff maybe that maybe they really did say I did it, because how do they know her name? You don't know. But so they'll get in your mind, I want a lawyer. I'm not talking, I want a lawyer. If they just have to repeat that over and over again, if they have to close their eyes to chime out all of the other stuff the police are saying, you're going down and we got your DNA, all of this stuff, even if it's true, do not talk. And we need to tell our children that ahead of time. We need to be proactive and not wait until the situation has happened. And it's an uncomfortable conversation, right? And you don't even want to make it seem like you ever think your child is going to be in that situation. So why would I even have that conversation? But you have it the same way you have it about sex and all the other drinking and drugs, the other things that you may hope your children refrain from forever or until a certain time, but you still are obligated to be a good parent and to communicate with your children and have these conversations. And so I would say that's the first line, is to have them before you ever get to this. But if you don't get that chance, send an attorney to that police station. They're free. And if you can't do that, then make sure, if you can, and if you care, to get your child out of that jail. It's a terrible place. It breaks people down, especially people who are not made for that, who really no one's made for it, but who has not been in there. And there are so many young men that have grown up in Cook County Department of Corrections. And it is an ugly thing, and it will break someone so quickly. And if you have at all the resources, and it requires stuff, and I know it's not so easily done, but do your best. And in the meantime, make sure you keep up communication with that child, go see them, write them, keep in contact with their attorney. Let the attorney know that, listen, this person has family that's looking out for them, that's concerned about them. This is not just a nameless person going through the system. And that doesn't mean challenging the attorney and thinking you know more and not letting them do their job. But it is saying, hey, I'm here, I care. If the child has to maybe give permission, if they're an adult, for that attorney to converse back and forth about the case with the parent, and more than likely they will. So you just want them to know, hey, you're in court. You may, if you can't go every court day, you want the judge to see this person has family. And it's really just to keep that person encouraged and make sure that, the attorney seems like they're trying. And again, those same things we said that a client would look for in the attorney. The parent should, in speaking to that attorney, have some type of confidence of what the possible outcomes are, from the best to the worst. You always want to know worst case scenario. You don't never want to be blindsided. And I tell my clients, I know you don't want to hear it, but this is the worst. You always want to be knowledgeable about everything that could happen to you in that system. The state may not file this violation, but if we go out and you hear them say violation of probation, this is what it means. And this is the impact it can have on you. I try to educate as much as possible. So the parent is also going to want to have that same type of communication with a lawyer, whether it's a paid lawyer or a private public defender. And I will tell some parents, if it's between getting money together for a private and getting your baby out of custody, get your baby out of custody and see what that public defender can do, because you'll be very surprised at the level of skill and care and fight that public defender may have. Not all of them are great. Not all of them care, but many do. And a lot of private attorneys ask public defenders for advice and help, because they're in the trenches every single day in front of these judges, dealing with these state's attorneys. And so they have a lot more, not necessarily experience, but they're around it more. So talk to your babies beforehand. If it happens, get an attorney to that station as quickly as possible. If you miss the station, don't freak out and think, oh my God, it's over. Just make it to that first court date. Be on the phone to those police stations. Know where they're going for bond court. Call until you get the answers you need. Be persistent, be diligent, and be a mama or papa bear, without getting yourself in trouble. Just, keep calling until you need to get the information you need. And those very first court dates are what are so important. That bond court is important. Sometimes the judges will ask family, hey, are you mom? How much can you afford? Can he come stay with you if we put him on house arrest? So sometimes having that face in those first proceedings is really critical. And it shows, I don't care how much history this person may have, a bad juvenile history. He may be might need a whooping, but he still got a mom and a daddy. Okay. So, and I'm here for him. So be present, be supportive. And, I would think just don't give up on them. And I know every situation is going to be different, and what the arrest is about and how involved it is with the family and what they're accused of. So that, there are all the different scenarios. But if it's just something typical on the street, guns, drugs, fighting, teach them the lesson afterwards, but get them out of the system, because it will eat them alive. It really will.
That's always my advice, Camille. If somebody is arrested and they're like, well, I need to get money for a lawyer. No, get your child out.
Yes.
Get them out.
Get them out of there. Yes.
Good advice. Good advice.
Yes.
I mean, people don't understand that small amount of time they may be locked up. If that's what it is, you don't know what they're going to be exposed to. So I think that's excellent advice. Just the things that I've witnessed as an officer, what people who have been locked up for the first time, their experiences of things. Oftentimes, when we get to the situation, it has already happened. So it's that person's account of what happened, and it could be too late. I've seen people change in a small amount of time. Someone come in very naive, very innocent, and when they leave, it's like this person their heart has been tainted.
Yeah.
And it's I won't say they've been physically violated, but you're spiritually violated. It's not a place for somebody who's really not cut out for that life.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. I'm sorry to interrupt. Here's the thing. If you're not satisfied with the public defender, which is And again, that is for indigent clients who aren't working, cannot afford a private attorney. The court appoints an attorney, and that attorney works in the courtroom day in and day out with that same judge, and they represent all those people who cannot afford a private attorney, and it's quite a few. But if you initially start with the public defender, if you qualify your child or yourself, and it comes to the point where you feel like I'm really not confident, I'm not satisfied, and again, we're not talking about because they're not telling you what you want to hear, but you really just feel like, you know what, this ship is sinking fast, and I don't feel like this person's gonna reach for me, anything. You always have the ability to bring in a private attorney at a later date. So again, bond those people out first. And then if you're feeling like, you know what, this is not going, collect some more money because you could bring in a private later, but get them out of that jail. Many are treated like animals, not only by the other inmates, but by the staff. It is not a place of rehabilitation. No one sees you as human. And I might be sounding very extreme, and I'm not speaking for every single person that comes into contact with people in that system, but just as an overall, it's nowhere you want to be. I've had women, I've heard of women who wanted to go to the penitentiary because the young ladies were raping each other in the county jail. That blew my mind that this woman was in a hurry to plead guilty to penitentiary time to get away from the environment. That's frightening. It's frightening. And it can be a physical violation. It could just be a mental violation. And once that person is broken, you know, it's really hard. And that's not something we want for any of our children. And sometimes the bonds, there are no bonds. You know, I empathize with parents who come in and they're there front and center, like I'm saying, and they're willing to bond out, and the judge says no bond. And the heartbreak and the tears. And it happens all the time, you know. And down the line, those people can have bond hearings, but depending on what the allegations are, it may or may not be lifted, you know, and it's only allegations at this point, you know, and this could be someone with no background. But if they say the right words, the state spins the story enough, and they're going only off the police report, which we know from the Van Dyke case and many other cases that the police can and have lied on reports. And I'm not saying that all police lie on reports, and I'm not saying that all arrests should not happen. You know, there are obviously people doing crime because crime happens rampantly. So people are doing it, and people should be arrested. So I'm not at all saying that, but there are those instances where it may take you 2 years to be found not guilty, but you have had to deal with the process all along. And I've seen people have to go through that, and thankfully you can finally give them that day in court. But, you know, they're like, but I lost my apartment. You know, I lost my job. You know, my girl left me. I've been seeing my kids. You know, it's a heck of a thing, and on a young mind to be in that county. You know, and when people treat you like a savage, guess what? You're going to start acting like one, you know. And then we're surprised when they're getting in fights and doing stuff. Well, yeah, he's been here since he was 17 years old. He's 23 now. You know, what you think he's going to be doing? It's not like this is a wonderful rehabilitation and, you know, we have wonderful school and all these great programs and people treated well, and people say, well, they're in jail, they shouldn't be treated fairly and nice, you know, because we're so always pointing the finger and judging because we're such a judgmental country, you know, that we're always ready to say who the bad person is and got a million bones in our own closet, but I digress. You know, I'm just saying, but if we think about it, we're not doing it necessarily for them. Right, we're saying at one point these people are going to get out and they have to come back into contact with people on the street. So how about if you don't feel like in your heart that you want to do it for the inmates, then act like we're doing everything else we do, and let's do it for ourselves. and for our own families and for our own, and say, you know what, and if I at least give them decent conditions and not give them green bologna every time and chemicals, and they sick and they mind's going bad, and they, and all of this stuff, then maybe if they come back out, they may have a chance of not breaking in another car or carrying another gun or, assaulting someone else. We have to think bigger, and we have to stop pointing the finger and saying, oh, no, you don't deserve it, so we're going to put you in this. And prison's about money, too, now.
Oh, yeah.
That's a whole nother hour conversation.
You're right about that one.
Yeah, private prisons as well as the non-private prisons.
Yes.
And that's one of the platforms that I'm seeing that some of these Democratic presidential candidates are talking about, is getting rid of private prisons. And if I'm not mistaken, I think I just read something about New York getting rid of private prisons.
Well, it would be a wonderful thing.
Altogether, yeah, because we can't have prisons for profit. But as you were talking about people not being able to afford, I was thinking about the term when they talk about like a pauper's prison. That you have people who are sitting in the county simply because they can't afford the bond. They're eligible to bond out, but they don't have the money to even put up the bond, so they stay there. And they could very well be innocent. And so you're just sitting and sitting and sitting and waiting to be acquitted. But you got to sit there. And that's unfair as well. And the other thought that I had was about when we were talking about get the children out, get your people out, bond them out, because there are lawyers who will work for you and take the bond.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that. A lot of people don't know that they would use that bond as payment. You'll sign it over to them at the end of the case. And there are many, many attorneys that will do that. And that's a wonderful service. And speaking of those people sitting in jail, it's so heartbreaking. I had a client on a $5,000 deposit, which means he needed $500. That client had been in jail for a year. He didn't have $500, nor did he have family that would come up with $500. And trust me, I know for some families, $500 is a lot, but over a course of a year, you know what I'm saying? Someone here give you 20, you can collect. I mean, it was heartbreaking for so many reasons that the court thought this was only worth $5,000. But once a person sits here for 6 months, and I brought it up for bond review, and it still wasn't changed, but they've sat now for how long? I mean, the punishment has been there, right? And bond is not even supposed to be punitive.
Exactly.
And they'll say, oh, I know, I just had this argument today in court. And but his background, and I said, but that's not what bond is supposed to be about. He's not a flight risk. Why are we still talking about what his background is, right? Bond's not supposed to be punitive. He's in here for a nonviolent charge. I said, and if we're talking about being a rehabilitative system, and they hate when I get up, girl, because they like, oh, here she comes. I can't help it. I just get off on a tangent because the state, oh, he's a bad guy. He's a 7-time convicted felon. Yeah, he does have 7 felonies, but guess what? He's a drug addict, and surprise, surprise, when you're a drug addict, you do some crimes, and they were nonviolent crimes. So this is not someone who's a drug addict that's out here killing and hitting people in the head. It's like burglary, different things. Right. Things that no one deserves to have happen to them or their property. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, to incarcerate and take the liberty of a man for a year, and now this is someone different, for maybe selling 1 bag of drugs allegedly. Why? And why are you now refusing when he wants to go somewhere to get drug treatment on house arrest? Are you saying no? Why? Why? It's sad because it's, again, that point the finger and shake the finger and you're a bad guy. We're so busy wanting to say who's bad guys. Meanwhile, we're being bad guys.
Hello.
You know what I mean? And we're a bad system. And it's a system that was built on a lot of bad guys. And I think, ladies, how I fight every day and argue Fourth Amendment motions based on the Constitution. And real talk is the Constitution didn't even include me or 99% of my clients when it was written. Because Black people weren't even considered human. You see what I'm saying? So this whole system is fundamentally flawed. And I don't really have the answers to how we're going to fix it. You know, like I said, it's so deeply rotten, almost like the police departments. How do you strip those down and start from fresh? I mean, it's a huge thing to think about. And people are trying to chip away, like they're doing the bond reforms now, where, you know, they have these bond initiatives where if it's a nonviolent charge, the judge is supposed to consider either an I bond or the amount that the family can post, because they see all of these people sitting in jail. It's people in jail for $100 and $200, at least for 4 and 5 months on misdemeanor charges that I technically don't even think you should be able to be physically locked up for, you know, but who am I? Right. So it's a huge problem. And now the big people are starting to see it. And so it's this big bond initiative, and it's had some impact, but it's still a lot of people sitting who shouldn't, you know, and every judge that's supposed to follow the rules doesn't. Because really, ladies and gentlemen, your bond depends on who is on the bench that day.
Oh, wow.
Let me tell you, there's not a lot of consistency. You know, you have some judges that understand and look at all the factors and know that a lot of factors come into play with people. And just because you missed court before, they know your butt ain't got no money to flee Illinois or Chicago or really your neighborhood. So they not really worried about you leaving. And then you have the ones that say, oh, you missed court 3 times before? Well, I can't give you an I bond because you probably won't come to court, you know, and those are the ones who are a little bit more removed from the reality of the people that come before them. But, you know, a bond can be an I bond or a 50,000 D depending on the day and what judge it is. And that is not right.
No.
And that is where it needs to be some consistency and some training and holding the judges accountable to follow these new initiatives, because what good are they if the people that have to enforce them are not, you know, and so that is some of the problem. State's attorneys not getting to use their discretion the way they should. You know, it's a whole slew of things, you know, with the system. And it's hard to watch. I sometimes ask myself, you know, how long I can do it, to be honest. And I'm so passionate about it, but it really just, it starts disgusting you, you know, a little bit. And, you know, it takes a toll on you when you just have to see it day in, even if it's not your client, even if it's something small, you just see it over and over, but you don't see, you know, you see all these Black people coming out the back. And I'm thinking Chicago is huge. And I know it's not only Black people committing crimes, you know, and I know there's a courthouse in different neighborhoods that may have the non-Black, but it's still just numbers wise. Majority. You see police writing tickets because, oh, well, he was riding his bike on the sidewalk, so we had to approach him, and somehow that turned into a search. And guess what? He had a bag of heroin on him. Well, how about you just roll down your window, officer, and say, hey, you know, it's a rule now. You can't ride your bike on the sidewalk if you're over 12 years old, because it's not televised. It's not on many billboards. Some people don't even know that that's a law. Right?
I didn't know. That's my first time hearing it.
Right. Most people don't know it, and they don't go to Lincoln Park or Lakeview and all of these other places and enforce it. They're just going on the west and south sides because it gives them a reason to approach, right? Because what happened to warnings? What happened to say, hey, now you know you're not supposed to drink on the public way, man. Go on and take your beer or pour that out, brother, and then, you know, go on about your business. Why would you have to arrest someone for something as petty as drinking alcohol in the public way when any Cubs game, you can go up on Clark Street and they're like walking zombies with beer and everything else, but they're not fighting. They're enjoying themselves and they're not bothering anybody. Just like on the west side, they're not bothering. It may be 5 of them in front of a house, relaxing. They're not fighting. But why would you arrest somebody for that? If you care that much, tell them to pour it out. and disperse or whatever, if you even need to do that, or just say, hey, that's arrestable. More than likely they're not going to do it, right? At least right in your face that time, but it's not worth it. You know what I mean? Write them a ticket. Like, let's use our discretion more, and it's not being used. And that's a big problem too, is that the police are not, using their discretion, and it's really based on the neighborhoods, and it's just it's so much. It's just so much.
I have a
Real
question.
quick, I'm sorry. I just
No,
wanted
go
her
ahead.
to clarify, because people may not understand what you meant when you said Fourth Amendment. So can you just tell us what that is for those that are listening?
Wait, I'm sorry. What is?
When you mentioned the Fourth Amendment, can you explain to people what the Fourth Amendment is?
Oh, the right to be free from unreasonable search and seizure. So typically, when a Fourth Amendment motion would come into play in a case where maybe, let's say, it's a traffic stop, and the police claim that the reason they approached you is because you violated some type of law. But really, in fact, maybe they just saw you and maybe three of your friends in the car, or maybe it was a fancy car for the neighborhood, or whatever stereotype or generalization that made them want to stop the car. They stopped the car, and then instead of saying, hey, your tail light, or you didn't signal, they ask you for your license, but they ask everyone out of the car. And then they're searching the car. And they're not lawfully searching the car. Nothing, they didn't smell cannabis, or they didn't see anything in plain view to give them that right or that probable cause to search the car. Then the defense attorney is going to look at all of the reports and possibly any video and decide if this is a case where a Fourth Amendment motion will come in. And there's a ton of case law that says when police have probable cause to search or to seize you, and seize you basically means they have limited your movement, your freedom. You're not free to go, basically. Every encounter with the police is not a seizure. Majority of them are. And so each case is fact specific. But in that instance with that traffic stop, let's say you're ultimately charged with the gun that was found under the seat you were sitting in. Even if the police don't see you making any movements towards that gun, the car doesn't belong to you. And really, routinely, when we get in the car to get a ride to a store, I don't look under the seat, right? Most people don't really look under the seat. They may know the people they're riding with and try to have a general idea about them, but there's no proof that you even knew that weapon was there, but yet you're charged with it. And this is a scenario that we get all the time, okay? So the lawyer may look at all of the facts, do the case law on the Fourth Amendment, and particularly about probable cause and when the police can do certain things, and they can write what we call a motion to quash arrest and suppress evidence. And basically it's saying to the judge, after you have your hearing, you're saying and arguing to the judge, listen, my client was seized. There was no warrant for that client. He was not seen committing any crimes. The search of wherever he was illegal because there was no basis for the seizure in the first place. And it's a lot more to it. I'm just kind of generalizing, but if the judge and the case law mostly agrees that the police never really had a right to stop you in the first place, and them stopping you without a right, which makes an illegal stop, anything that is recovered that you were charged with from that illegal stop should be suppressed. Now, again, it's very fact specific, and I'm being very general. It depends on if there are any intervening instances. Things could be a little bit different, but in certain circumstances, if the judge does find that there was no basis for the stop and the search was illegal, then that gun is suppressed, which means the state cannot use that gun against you anymore. And if that gun was the only evidence against you, it's the basis of your charge, then more than likely your charge will get dismissed. And there are many cases that get disposed of on motions. Not all of them. Everyone does not have a motion. I know a lot of people hear it and think, well, what about a motion? But it's not applicable in every case. Again, it's very fact specific. But some very serious cases can be disposed of if the police are not doing their jobs properly. So that is what I meant by
Thanks, I'm sure.
Fourth Amendment motion. Yep.
I got one for you, and it's something that I've witnessed taking inmates to court, and I really would like you to address it, because women think that I dropped my charges from my man against my man. I think he should come home, not realizing that the state can pick those charges up. And then they're sitting there with their mother saying, well, we dropped the charges. I know we said that he beat us down, but we dropped the charges, so we think he should come home. Can you address that? Because so many inmates, so many young men think they should go home after that, and so many young ladies think, when I drop the charges, my man gonna come back home to me. And this is in a domestic issue. So can you clarify on that, or go in depth for me a little bit?
Yeah, so that is something, and I don't know when they started kind of doing that whole thing of picking up the charges, like how long it dates back, but it probably used to be where, listen, I'm the one who said I was the victim. I'm the one that called the police and said he hit me, right? And that's, you arrested him and now he's in jail. But now either if he really did hit me, I'm a little bit over it and I want him home, or maybe I made it up from the beginning and I'm ready to be honest about it. Who knows which the situation is, but there are a lot of CWs, and that's the word for complaining witnesses, or victim, aka victim in certain cases, who, especially in domestics, will change their mind. Now, I think the state started realizing that, again, a lot of, especially women in abusive relationships, that it's this cycle, right? That you are angry enough, you call the police, he hurt you, and then he says, oh, baby, I'm sorry, I won't do it anymore. Or you start feeling scared that you press charges. And so they didn't really trust a lot of the reasons that people were withdrawing these charges. And so they started picking them up and said, well, you came, you made this sworn statement. Sometimes they have you testify in front of the court in order to get a warrant to arrest that person. You come in and say, he pushed me. And sometimes they will force your hand and, say, well, we're not going to drop the charges. Now they may say that up until it's just enough for that person to plead guilty, or the attorney to say, okay, well, let's go to trial then, because we had this person who's saying they didn't do it, and so they kind of will play that whole game of, we'll pick up the charges. And sometimes they really will carry it through all the way to the end. But it's hard to prove a case when you don't have someone cooperating with you who's the alleged victim. But anytime you have made a prior statement on the record or was sworn to it, they can use that against you. And you can come on the stand and say, no, he didn't do it. And even though you're really their witness, they can say, well, closer to the time, didn't you have these injuries? And, didn't you swear and say that this is what he did and he punched you and he this and that? You know what I mean? So it's a very funny situation. On one hand, domestic violence is such an awful thing, and a lot of victims are afraid, and they get enough courage for 1 minute to do it, and then something happens, and so it's like a double-edged sword that is really sometimes hard for the attorneys, because you're in this situation where you have to make some decisions with the client, of how you want to proceed, based on, is there a lot of evidence that that person was telling the truth initially, and you better pray your client isn't the reason they're saying, I don't want to press charges. Don't be on that jail phone saying stop, which has happened, it has happened. I don't want any letters, and don't have your sister calling and telling them to stop pressing charges, because that's a whole nother charge. But yes, there is such a thing as the state picking up the case and it not just going away as quickly as you thought it would. Sometimes they'll just say, okay, I'm not going to be bothered with it. But if it's a really serious case with some serious injuries, they're going to frown and say, you know what, I don't trust this. I don't believe that this didn't happen. And in particular, if there was a witness to it, they don't even need the victim anymore. If there was someone who saw the domestic violence or the fight outside or the fight on the CTA bus between a spouse or girlfriend, boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever, sister, brother, because domestic covers roommates, it covers mother, son, mother, daughter, it covers, I've had brother and sisters against each other. People think it's only romantic relationships, but it's any domestic relationship. You know, so there's been mothers against sons. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I had mothers who had their sons in jail for breaking their flat screen TVs. You know, criminal damage to property could be domestic related. And it's unbelievable because it's like, wow, I know you might have a lot dealing with this son who might have anger issues, mental health. Who knows? I mean, it may not be rainbows at home, but you're thinking, wow, the justice system, you know, but there's no judgment because who am I? I don't know what's going on in the house, what measures you took before this, you know, but it just seems so extreme, like a TV, you know, this system, you know, a TV. But again, no judgment because I know there's some mothers that go through a lot with kids, you know, so I don't know. But yeah, it doesn't automatically go away in that instance. And you still really sometimes have to fight with the state or really take it to trial, you know.
Camille, you know, you have a heart. and I say that, and I'm going to bring this up because of what you do, and you defend criminals every single day, and you zealously advocate for your clients. And I'm sure you have some people that walk in there who've been accused of all sorts of heinous crimes. You've had people who you know are guilty, but they still deserve a defense, but you still have the heart to defend. And I'm going here because you experienced a tragedy yourself.
Yeah.
With your family, with the murder of your grandmother. And yet you still have the heart that you have today to defend those, you know, who that people still have a right to a defense. And so it hasn't changed your heart. And I just had to say that because as I'm listening, you know, as we're doing this conversation and I'm listening to you and you're telling people, no, the system is this way, and you really could be better and you're not. And so I just appreciate that about you. And I just kind of wanted to say something about that. And if you care to talk about it, please.
Absolutely. And you know what? I really appreciate that because it's so funny. Sometimes I really have to stop and ask myself, like, how do you still do this? You know, I think sometimes it brings awe to myself as well to say, you know, how is this? And this is actually the second person very important in my life who was murdered. My child's father was murdered as well years ago.
Yes.
And I really thought that it would mark my abilities and kind of bias me. And it didn't. And I think that just like I know that I'm not above becoming a defendant, I'm also not above becoming a victim. And I don't know how long it will last, to be honest. So last year in June, my 81-year-old grandmother was murdered in her home in a really brutal and really heinous way. And we're still seeking justice. And the police are actively working on the case, and we have confidence in them, and we're working with the police, you know, but we have not had any final things come yet. But a little bit of it, I think, is that I'm so kind of still in a shock about what happened with my grandmother that it really allows me to still go through life almost not as if it didn't happen, because I'm very well aware of that it did. But there's this layer of insulation I think I have put around myself really from the day I found out about it, just because of the brutal nature of it. Almost a shock, but one I've just kind of been trying to ride the wave of, just to kind of get through and keep putting one foot in front of the other. But at the same time, I really want to believe that as much as I want justice in my grandmother's case, and we do, and I want to talk about that later, justice for Thana. Her name was Thana Muhammad, and she was a beautiful, beautiful, strong boss woman who gave back to her community and just really made some power moves throughout her life. But as much as I want and we actively seek justice for her, I still know, and she would still want me to fight the way I do, because this system was flawed before what happened to her, right? And whoever is going to be held accountable for what happened to her, they will also get their day in court. And we will pray that the evidence is so strong that even the best defense attorney, who crosses the T's and dots the I, as they should, right? Because everyone deserves a fair trial. And we would hope that even this person who did this to my grandmother, we would just hope and pray that the evidence was just so strong that it would result in the right outcome. But it would be very hypocritical of me to only think in my case, right, when I'm a victim or my family is a victim, that suddenly everything shouldn't apply anymore. Because all of my clients, or some of them, if they're not property crimes or drug crimes or just gun cases, have victims. And I care what happened to those people as well. And because I defend the client doesn't mean that I ignore what happened to this person, that I don't empathize with this person, that I don't think it's horrible what happened to this person. But it's some role I play, right, depending on the case and the evidence. Sometimes a defense attorney is there just to be a safekeeper of justice, let's say, to make sure that, okay, you have this blood evidence. Well, how did you get it? We're going to make sure that it was tagged properly, make sure that it wasn't cross-contaminated. You want to make sure everything, because we all want the right person, right? And so sometimes you're not there to necessarily beat the case. Sometimes you're there just to mediate. Because like say, when the death penalty was still here, there were some attorneys where the evidence was so strong, but they were just there to try to get maybe life sentence. That was a win for them instead of the death penalty. You know what I mean? So sometimes, depending on your case, you're just there to make sure things happen properly and that way. And so I keep telling myself that even though this happened to my grandmother, and even though we want the person held accountable, that it still has no bearing on what I have to go do every day. When we have picked juries, we ask them, did anything ever happen to you? Well, yes, maybe I was robbed or I was raped or I was beaten. And they'll say, well, are you able to separate that? Do you know that this person is not the one that did that? Yes. Would you be able to give this person a fair trial? Yes. Now, obviously, if it's a sex trial or some type of sexual assault, you're not going to necessarily want that person who's been raped, because even if they think with their strongest heart they could be unbiased, more than likely they may not be. So as a defense attorney, you would probably say, you know what, we're not going to put them through that. We just don't want to chance it. It may trigger some trauma. And really, it's just not fair. Why would someone want to sit through that, right? And so it's almost the same way. You have to say to yourself, these are not the people that did this. And I just stand for the fundamental principle of justice and equality, and know that this country is not built on upon those foundations. And I still just try to step forward, in peace and positivity. And but I would not be honest at all if I did not tell you that sometimes I wonder how long I can be in this type of system, doing this type of work, only because it you absorb it, and some of it is so toxic. And not only the fights against injustice, but just some of the cases. It's a lot. And so now I'm very happy that I'm able to still do it. And if I can't do it with passion, girl, I'm telling you, I'm really gonna bow out, because once that leaves, there would really be no place for me in the system, because I think you have to be passionate in order to get through all of this stuff that you go through in the system. But for now, we're still praying for justice for Thana, for my beautiful grandmother. She just would have made 83 on July 10th. We lit some candles and had a cake in celebration of her, my family and I. And we are still seeking answers, ladies and gentlemen of Chicago community. If you hear or know anything about the murder of Thana Muhammad that happened in June of 2018, we still very much want to know anything additional, any little thing that helps, regardless of what is known already. The more, the better. And so we are still seeking those answers. But I walk in the strength of my grandmother, and I really let her spirit lead me, and her strength. She had been through a lot of things in life, and she did not allow it to take her out. And so I would like to emulate her as long as I can in those characteristics that she had. But I really appreciate you seeing that and acknowledging and noticing that.
Welcome. So I guess we're at our challenges. And so when Hakima turns her microphone back on, she can give us our challenges.
Right, I was just talking, right? Man, this is powerful. Man, I'm sitting here like, woo, we can go on for another hour. But this brings me to my challenges. And challenges number one is all of you out there that's sitting with information on these crimes that have been unsolved need to come forward and report what you know. There's too many unsolved cases, and we definitely need to get justice for Grandma Muhammad. We definitely need to get justice for her. So if anyone has any information on that case, please come forward. But if you have information on any other cases that have been unsolved, please come forward. You will bring justice to the family. My second challenge is learn your rights. We've been talking about rights today. Learn them. Just because the officer approach you don't mean they know the rights. It's up to you to know your own rights. You cannot just assume, oh, they doing it, they can do it. We need to know our rights. Next challenge that I have is make that right decision, bond or paid attorney. As we talked about today, is try to get your family up out of that system. Get them out of there while they're fighting the case, because you just don't know the trauma that they're going to experience while they're locked up. So if you have the choice to go bond or paid attorney, try to bond your family member out so that they can fight their case on the outside, not on the inside. Do your research, people. This is the last challenge. Do your research on the criminal justice system. Not just learn your rights, but understand the system itself. You cannot help, contribute, improve a system if you don't know anything about it. And those are my challenges. I'm going to leave you a last word, Sister Camille.
I think those are all wonderful challenges. I'm telling you, every single one of them, I'm sitting here like, yes, yes, we have to start speaking out. I know there is this code of silence, and I just want to end with that. And because I'm seeking answers about my own family, there are so many in my family's position that have unanswered questions, and our communities are terrified, and we know a lot of these answers. And we're afraid, or we just have become accustomed to the no snitching. But guess what? snitching is when you do a crime with someone else and then you tell on them. It has become really miscommunicated and misconstrued that you're snitching when you tell something that you know about a horrible crime that has happened. That is not snitching. It is not dishonorable. Does it sometimes compromise safety? Absolutely. And I understand that and empathize with that. And I know our systems and state's attorneys and police don't always have measures in place, especially for people in our communities, to say, well, you want me to tell this and come testify, but how are you gonna help me when I have to go home? And everyone knows or thinks that I said something. So we are not, not thinking about that, but just as a whole, we have to take back our communities and show that we care. And I think that challenge of speaking up is huge. I just want to say for my grandmother's case, I had a couple of numbers that I wanted to put out. We have a Justice for Thana Muhammad, Justice for Thana page on Facebook, as well as Twitter. The Area South Detectives, if you know anything about the Thana Muhammad murder from June of 2018, she was found on the south side in the area of 100th Street and Forest Avenue in her home. The Area South Detectives phone number is 312-747-8271. Again, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, it's Justice for Thana, and that is THANA. And also we have our own family email. It's justiceforthana@gmail.com. If you want to send a communication, if you want to send a prayer, listen, we need all the love, prayer. We need any answers. We are here in the community, walking amongst the community. We are part of the community, and my grandmother was, and she deserves answers. And we know that the police are seeking answers, but they can't always do it all. A lot of things they rely on the community for, because we are around when a lot of things happen. We see a lot of things that are out of place. And so we ask for your help if you have it. And if you don't have any information, we would just appreciate your prayers and well wishes, just for my family, any emotional support, prayers for my mom, who was a devastated daughter, but a warrior fighter, seeking justice for her mom, my grandmother. And I just really appreciate this time, ladies, and just allowing me to talk about what I love and ramble on. And I hope I didn't ramble too much, but I have really enjoyed this time.
No, ma'am. Not at
and
all.
hope that I appreciate it. And I hope that someone got something from it. It's an ugly system. Take care of your people. Talk to your kids, to your adults. It's never too late to be educated. Like she said, know your rights. A lot of the police don't know, and if they do know, sometimes they're still violating them. But believe it or not, a lot of them don't really know what case law says. They don't know. They go to the academy, but they don't know. So know your rights. You don't have to go to law school. It's just a little reading, research. You can learn so much that way. And just uplift everyone. If we all are good to each other, and try to uplift each other, I think that we can really remedy a lot of this poison that the world is now infested with. And it's so many people dealing with trauma. We have a Thana Foundation. I'm sorry, I wanted to say that. We formed a Thana Foundation in honor of my grandmother, and we want to address trauma in our communities. And our first program is going to be October 5th at IIT, and I can get the flyer for you, but we are presenting on suicide, because you hear so much now about children committing suicide, police committing suicide, mothers killing themselves and their children who really didn't seem to have any prior mental health issues. It's just a huge problem right now. And it's really a lot of undiagnosed trauma, we believe, and a lot of undiagnosed PTSD in our communities. We see videos and people getting killed and hear of our friends, and we just go to work the next day and think it doesn't poison our mind and hearts and souls, and it does. And so we want to address trauma, and especially in the midst of dealing with our own trauma. We want to try to reach out, and that is our therapy for ourselves. And it's going to be at IIT, the Thana Foundation. It's going to be on police and community suicide. And we will get a flyer out. So look for that. Again, save the date, October 5th, 2019.
All right.
Thank
October
you.
5th, 2019. You guys heard that.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Camille. You have brought a wealth of information and knowledge to it, and passion, because that's the one aspect of the criminal justice system that is left out. There are so many people who are working inside the criminal justice system that has so much passion to help those who are actually inside the criminal justice system. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for listening every week, and we look forward to you joining us.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Conversations with the Royal Empress. Tune in next week for another enlightening conversation. For more information on the Royal Empress, please visit the website royalempress.org. You can also follow the Royal Empress on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Conversations with the Royal Empress is a subsidiary of the Royal Empress organization. All rights reserved.